Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Emily Butler. I'm the Conversations Manager here at Art Basel. A very warm welcome to our Conversations program. We've actually had to rename the entire series in honor of Alvaro Barrington this afternoon, because it's not only the artist and the gallerist, but it's the artist and the gallerists today. And we're celebrating Alvaro's work and his collaboration with many of his collaborative galleries. So we have Tim Blum, who's a co-founder of Blum and Poe. We have Pedro Mendes, co-founder of Mendes Wood. A new collaborator, Kyla Macmillan, who's the founder of St. George Projects. And we're delighted that the panel will be moderated by Lou Stoppard, who's a writer and a curator from London. Just before I hand over, one small word of housekeeping before we start. Please can you keep your mask on throughout the conversation, and we'll be passing a mic around at the end to ask some questions. Please keep the mask on when you're asking questions into the mic. But without further ado, please give our speakers today a very warm round of applause and enjoy the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Hi, Alvaro. It's always good to be chatting with you. So the first question, I want to dive right into sort of the premise of this conversation. And the panel description that I'm sure you guys read, which is part of the reason you're here, talked about Alvaro as having a unique relationship with his galleries. And I think as a first question, I'd like to establish why that relationship is unique, and if such a way of working should be unique, and what are the habits of thinking that have made it unique. So that was a series of 3 questions in one. But Alvaro, explain to us why you have a different relationship with your galleries than what we're used to for an artist.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I thought I'd be a little bit more nervous than I am, but I still am kind of nervous. I don't know if I think history sort of tends to erase a lot of stuff, but I guess people consider it unique because the kind of model that has been seen for the last 20-odd years is you have an artist and a gallery and in a city, and that's sort of it. Whereas I kind of tend to work with galleries who brings a lot of different things to my practice. And it's not only like, it doesn't necessarily, all the galleries, I think, I have a relationship with them in terms of what we do. And I can kind of, if I went in and talked about what Pedro and Brazil mean, or what Tim and LA mean, or what Kyla and the kind of spaces we inhabit mean, then it'll kind of take up the whole time. But I think it's only special because I kind of emphasize a collective agreement. We have a conversation and we really have a lot of respect for each other, and I put that respect and honor forward. And I think people don't necessarily know how to look at relationships that are poly-gallery. I think they only know how to look at it like kind of one monoculture. And I think maybe that's the only thing that makes it weird, but it's not really weird at all. And it's been done in many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Tim, you've been around for a while. Do you think that this is a unique model, and why is it a model that we don't see more of?
Yeah, it's a unique model, but Alvaro is a very unique individual. So I don't think it's a model that you could easily mimic or duplicate. It requires a unusual force of will and personality, which our friend Alvaro has in spades. But it's a model that I think is I would think it's essential, and I think it would be a shot of much needed energy in a further fracturing art world inside a further fracturing world, because it engenders and promotes communication, collaboration, cooperation among, galleries and artists. And as many of you no doubt know, that's the model that's being propagated is all or nothing. So.
Actually, sorry, so I think I'm speaking a bit cryptically, so maybe I'll just sort of try to be a bit straightforward. So the relationship that I have with Pedro and why I work with Mendes Woods is because I've always had a wild imagination around Brazil. And a wild imagination around the culture of Brazil, what it means, its long history, what it means. Like I remember somebody said that the Amazon is the lungs of the world. But when you think about the migration, its sort of imagination, its connection to Africa, its connection to blackness, its connection to a kind of integrated hybrid community, I got very excited when Pedro said, I would love to work with you. And he loves Brazil. And he was there in the pandemic, and I wanted to work with Brazil. I didn't want to work with a gallery that has a pop-up space in Brazil. I wanted to work with someone who really loves Brazil, who really has an imagination of where the past and the future can go. And also the artists that they work with, such as Sonia Gomez. If you look at her work and you look at my work, you'll see that I'm stealing from Sonia Gomez. Right? And so I got very excited, and I said, I want to work with this guy because I want to work. I have this huge imagination for what Brazil can mean for me personally, and being there. Tim, who actually Pedro introduced me to, growing up in Brooklyn in the 90s, the West Coast, I kind of came into, I was listening to a lot of my parents' music, and around the early 90s was when I got to hang out with my cousins and listen to their music. And it was the rise of NWA, of Snoop Dogg, of Tupac. And so way before I really knew what New York music was or any kind of thing was, I knew LA. And so when Tim was very gracious to say, I would love to work with you, I just knew I had to be with him in LA. I knew I had to be with a gallery that loves LA, that believes in the culture of LA. Of course, they're also both very global, so they think globally, but they love locally. And Kyla, we just did a project on my cousin runs a church, and she said, she messaged me and said, Alvaro, you're an artist. Let's do something together. And so Kyla and she has a space that used to be a barber shop. And if anybody knows what a barber shop means to the community, you'll know that's a meeting space, also what the church means. And so she was like, how can we reimagine what art and how art reaches out to the community? So we rented the space from my cousin, and we did which is in this Caribbean part of Brooklyn, and we did an exhibition. And there were people who I went to elementary school with, who I haven't been in touch with for 20 years, who walked in this space and said, oh, Alvaro? I went to school years ago with him. This is what he's doing now? And so I didn't become this sort of amorphous artist who's far away. We were right in the neighborhood. We're also from the same, our parents are from the same island. And so we can do projects where it's not about we're okay, let's just do a project in my cousin's space. In a part of New York City and Brooklyn that there's local galleries, but it doesn't look like a Chelsea or a Mayfair gallery. But we're doing work in there, and we're trying to figure out how does my practice fit in more within my community. I don't also think, I mean, you know, there's a lot of artists who do stuff like that. I think the problem is also like we have what we were growing into, and sorry, I'm about to get on some Kanye rant, who I love, hate by the, who I love. But it's like, there's this weird, I found like there's this weird relationship where artists now has sort of like, and this is also why I love both of these guys, and also all of the other dealers that I work with. There was this moment where like you always had artists who were like a part of academia. So you had like artists who studied under Leonardo or whoever, and today those are like artists who go to Yale or Slade or whatever. But there was also like a space where artists came out of culture. Like way before I knew Tim, I knew what Tim's impact was on my life, because there was a period where like what Murakami and Kanye's famous video, which was shot in the gallery, all of those, they were like a space where artists came out of culture. Like Basquiat was hanging out with Madonna. He's in the first rap video, which is Blondie's Rapture. So there was this sort of idea that artists were sort of in culture, and they were the makers in culture who kind of rose up. And now we kind of are at the space where artists are sort of almost exclusively coming out of the Yales and the Columbias. And I'm excited about galleries that are like, let's try to figure out. Oh, see, they got tired of my rant, so maybe I should shut up. They cut me off. But I just thought, man, like, you know, one of the things that we're all excited about is like, how do we really build within culture? Like, how do we have cultural conversations, not only with like a collecting class, but also with people every day, and the people that I came up in, like my neighbor. Sorry, I'm gonna stop because
I actually want to pick up on some of the things that you just said and ask Kyla how they relate to your practice and to St. George projects, because I think what Alvaro is talking about is disrupting some of these ideas around space and size and permanence and even like geographic sort of centers that have so defined the art world and defined some of these barriers that Alvaro was referring to in terms of who is an artist, what is a proper gallery, what is a proper artist, what is relevant or significant. And I know that your work is also pushing against that. And so tell me a little bit about it more broadly, and also about the project that you've done with Alvaro and about what you make of those themes in general.
Yeah, I mean, St. George projects really began with Alvaro, truly. I mean, it's been 3 months. We did a show that opened in September, but I realized in working with Alvaro that was really the only way I wanted to work, you know, just those really organic collaborations, to be able to have a close relationship with the artist where it feels like the context is so right that everything else just has to come together. You know, that unwavering belief that the work needs to be presented in the environment that inspired it ultimately. I mean, I didn't realize even in organizing the show with Alvaro how perfect it was for it to be the first project. I mean, I think that there's so much flexibility. I'm not so interested in the traditional model as we know it. I've worked in it. I mean, it's just not really a model that's designed for me personally to flourish. So I just realized there's really no reason for me to participate in that when I can do work that makes me a bit happier and remain nimble. I think adaptability, we've all learned, especially of late, how important it is to remain adaptable. I like to be able to provide artists the opportunity to do something maybe a bit alternative that they can't do at more traditional galleries where there's a specific brick and mortar space, you know. And I like being able to collaborate with other gallerists. I'm a bit wary of that kind of ownership over artists. I think the best stuff comes out of collaboration. You know, galleries don't exist without the artists. So it's, for me, it's a great way to build community. But yeah, I mean, it really did start with Alvaro.
Oh, sorry. Can I tell a story that means a lot to me? You know, in high school, I didn't even know you were supposed to go to college afterwards. And everybody, there was like March, the year that I was supposed to graduate, and all the kids had done their college visitations and stuff like that. And I was like, oh shit, y'all already did college visitation? I didn't know we were supposed to go visit colleges. And I was ready to sort of kind of continue on a lifestyle that me and my friends was on. And one day I was on a train, and a woman saw me, and she said, are you going to go to college? And I was like, I guess so. And she gave me a card, and she said, come to my office. And I went to her office, and then my boy and I got into college because she was a counselor at a college. She walked into the show I did with Kyla. Her name's Kumar, and she sent me an email. And because she had no idea what happened to me afterwards. And she saw that show because the show was in that neighborhood. And because she saw this kid on the train who clearly was going down a path, and she wanted to stop me from going down that path, said, you should come to see me to figure out to get into college. And she saw the show. And that show would have never been possible if it was in the Upper East Side. And I think it gave her a sense of ease to know how much she changed my life.
I think what's interesting about what you're saying is, I imagine, I don't know if anyone here, for example, is like an aspiring artist, but I imagine if I was an aspiring artist listening to this, I would feel a mixture of being very inspired, but also probably somewhat frustrated, because I would think, but hang on, this stuff is so rare, this doesn't actually happen. Because I think the art world still has a feeling of being impenetrable and very reliant on this notion of exclusivity, which it has been very reluctant to move away from. And I think I'm fascinated in trying to understand how that notion plays a role within the art world today, and if we are genuinely moving away from it. Maybe we'll go to you. Big question.
It's such a pleasure and honor to be with you guys here. Really, thank you. Well, when we started the gallery, it wasn't really a gallery, it was an utopia. We started a non-profit. Me and Matthew, we came from Paris, we studied philosophy, and we're sort of trying to figure out what to do with our lives, but we knew for sure that we wanted to be engaged with culture, and how weaving, being part of the weaving culture of Brazil was something that meant to us some sort of relief out of the alienating academia. Matthew was considering to go to Cambridge. I was sort of thinking of going back to the family business, and all of a sudden we said, you know what, let's start an art project in the middle of nowhere. So we found a warehouse that looked like Baghdad Cafe, if you guys watched that film, in the middle of nowhere in Minas Gerais, and we sent an open call. We identified some thinkers and creators, we created the board, and we sent an open call to the community, inviting artists to join and be residents and be thinkers and be writers and be themselves. We didn't know what we were doing. The first letter we received was Paulo Nazareth proposing a really complex project to basically steal the plants from the rich neighborhoods and plant them in this middle of nowhere community. And that's how we met Paulo, and he became part of our lives immediately. And from then on, we realized that was getting traction. We were receiving people like the local curators, and then we had the honor to receive a few years later Hans Ulrich in the project, and we noticed the power that culture had to just simply rewrite history, right? From a kid who was just locally known as Paulo Nazareth, to really getting all the acknowledgement that he deserved. It was really an honor to be part of that, and yeah, I strongly believe that responding to you, that what we do ultimately is to empower people, thinkers, artists, poets, and they empower us. And I don't believe a gallery can start for any other reason than that.
It's interesting, and everyone has sort of implied or explicitly mentioned this idea of an older model. So we're obviously talking about these kind of white box, white cube type spaces. We're talking about a relationship where an artist has a gallery in, based on a geographic location. They won't have multiple gallerists within the same space. They will very rarely have their gallerists working together. So maybe if we establish that as the old model, what I'm interested in is the steps that it's going to need to take to move on from that, and also Alvaro specifically in how your attempts to disrupt that. What is driving that? Is it a sense of discomfort at the art world? Is it a sense of a deliberate desire to rehash something and establish a new model? Or is that simplistic? Is it just a much more personal, much more instinctive approach?
It's much more instinctive, but I think mostly, I think it's kind of, if you grow up in New York City, and I've said this a couple times, so it's like maybe there's two things. And this is sort of why it's instinctive. Mendes work with an artist, Paulo Nazareth, who's a walker, and that's his practice. His practice is he's a walker, and I wish I could poetically put how powerful that is, especially when we've all been stuck in our houses, or for those who've had to work, has had to drive and deliver food to people. The idea of walking and feeling with your feet. And so when I think about my paintings, I was working on these paintings that were thinking about migration. And then I thought, what if you had to make a map? I was looking at these G's Bend quilts, and I was thinking about how they were making maps, but they were making maps with their feet because Google Maps didn't exist. And then I thought about Paulo Nazareth and this idea of him being a walker, so feeling the texture of the earth with his feet and making that into art. And then I thought, okay, I need to figure out how to make some work that is about feeling the earth with my feet through my hands. And so that relationship makes me go, there's something that Mendes would be able to explain to someone who goes, what the fuck is this painting? And they can go, here's how he got here. Oh. Somebody's face mask needs to be worn. But that's where the relationship comes in. And I could say the same for Tim. When we're talking about, there's so much of our ethos about what art means as a healing idea. You know, his wife is a healer. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Apologize. But there's so much I get from the conversations that go, okay, I need to go back to the studio and make something that is born from that conversation. And I feel like whatever the older model was like trying to tell people, oh, this person can't be your friend because they work at another gallery. And I'm like, I don't want anybody to tell me who I can't listen to. Because we're more and more in a world where the algorithms are telling us who we can listen to and who should have our opinions. And I just said, I want to live in a world where I just want to listen to everybody. And these are real relationships that I want to have forever, because we're going to grow and I'm going to get more from them. And same thing with Kyla and, you know, everybody else.
Just want to make a commentary on that. It's so inspiring to hear Alvaro saying that, as we live in this advanced capitalism where obviously the system of patriarchy is what defines companies and what defines economic organisms. Once Alvaro says collaborations are what germinates any sort of exchange, being economic, being cultural, being symbolic. This is a really radical statement. I think this is the last realm where we can make those choices and say, I want to live in a system where my company is a living organism, that a gallery is simply a place where meaning is distributed, wealth is distributed, energy is distributed. Collaborations simply mean we don't believe in the patriarchy, the old system where there's just one powerful man that empowers artists and there's a huge divide in between. I think what we're trying to do here is, and Alvaro is doing brilliantly, is to create a new system of a rhizomatic system where there is an equality of ideas and shares of opinions and collective intelligence is what actually gives the answer, not one individual or one boss or one genius artist who has the final word, right? I think we're pretty much sort of in the end of this era, hopefully.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because Alvaro and I have discussed this quote before, but there's a really great line from René Ricard where he's talking about Basquiat, and he says, one must become the iconic representation of oneself in this town, which I think is such a sort of a statement on the art world that continues to apply to this day, and actually on broader culture, that one almost has to perform one's purpose, one's identity, one's significance to such an extent that it limits your flexibility to live multiple different facets and multiple different identities, which I know is something that Alvaro is very sort of like passionate and feels very deeply. But I'm interested in the role that a gallery can play, as you mentioned, as a sort of a nimble, flexible space, when we also struggle to sort of reconcile that with the role of a gallery as a permanent, as a significant space, as a space that sort of allows people to be reflective, allows art to sort of shine in the way that you would want to display something. And Tim, maybe this is a question for you as someone who is sort of a titan in some ways of that older model, but also I know is very passionate about these more flexible, looser ways of approaching. Like, how do we get that balance? That was a really long question. Make of that what you will. I'm like, what's the future of the gallery?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot going on there. Tighten, balance. Jeff and I founded the gallery in 1994 with basically two different lived experiences and a small amount of cash in a very tiny space. But we kind of came up quickly with a general mandate or ethos that was reflected in this simple statement of play the game, change the rules. And that's kind of what we've always done since '94.
Which rules would you say you were trying to change?
The rules you're describing. I mean, those rules were hard and fastened at that time. And we came up in a Los Angeles that was second city. And I don't mean Chicago, I mean like LA was second city in America. And it was always the afterthought. Including for artists. They would focus a body of work for a New York show, but LA would be second city. So we had to battle quite hard. We came up in those trenches of that imbalance. So, I mean, the rules remain. But I think back then as well, we always used to say, we knew intuitively, I had had a lot of experience living and working in Japan, which really generally had the biggest impact on my life, which is how I see the world. But we had always said to the artists, even when we didn't have anything to ground ourselves in, we always knew somehow that the artists were in charge and needed to take charge and needed to embody that charge. And we would help them figure out the path forward. But, you guys are in charge, and we want to serve you. And we've actually, you can literally ask somebody like Mark Grochon, is that true what Tim says? And absolutely it is. And it's the system has somehow actually become more concretized towards this other older way. And I'm not going to name names, but it's about signing people, concretizing things via documentation and or any other kind of methodology. It's actually, I find it repulsive because it's something that I've come up in since 27, 30 years. And it actually feels like it's getting worse. And so that's these two tectonic plates of that old system crashing up against a new system, of which Alvaro is blessedly, you're like I hate these terms, but it's like a change maker. It's like you're single-handedly, maybe I think, influencing as a perfect, beautiful model for other artists that come up or that are even up and just simply need to wake up. This is probably, it's antithetical to running a business, because people are, oh no, you've got to take control. We have to open in New York and London and Paris and Milano and, Sao Paulo and, blah, 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 blah. And it's the death. It's the death. And it actually has to stop. And I'll do whatever the fuck it takes to help stop it. And I want to reach out and help, younger dealers. I'm always happy to mentor people. Anybody wants to call me. And it's like, I want to give back.
I think the word that... I think the word that no one has mentioned, but that is the elephant in this room and that huge room as well, is money, which is why this model has become more and more prevalent, as you correctly referred to. And I'm interested in how Alvaro's model disrupts the sort of monetary aspect of the art world, this idea of ownership, this idea of value, and how inflexible that allows the art world to be sometimes, and also how important it is to push against that. And Alvaro, maybe this goes to you first, and then everyone can chip in. Is there a deliberate sense of you, by having so many different projects, so many different galleries, to undermine that traditional sort of monetary relationship between artist, gallery, and then collector?
I think there's a big difference between value and then and sometimes value can have a price tag, but I think art is something very different, and what I want to do is be an artist, and I feel like my safest zone is like me sitting in front of a TV watching cartoons and drawing. It's my way of sort of processing my life. but also I grew up in a large community with many different people. You know, I stayed at different aunts' houses every weekend and have like a long extended family. So there's nothing. I don't find it. I find it like kind of masturbatory to make a work and then all of a sudden it doesn't connect to anybody. I don't know if I produce a lot. I just know that there's a difference between showing a work in Chelsea. You know, actually, this is me. I don't kind of all over the place, but somebody told me once that culture is a story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Right? So if you tell, and I say this all the time, but if you tell yourself like, oh, I'm a liberal, and somebody goes, oh, that gay person got beat up, the first thing you're going to think is it's some homophobic attack. If you tell yourself, oh, I'm a conservative, and then you hear, oh, that gay person got beat up, you're going to have a different opinion of it, not because you know anything about what actually happened, but because emotionally, the culture that was created by maybe some Democrats or Republicans or Silicon Valley has sort of said, this is what you need to feel about things. And I just think artists need to be honest about what they're feeling and then try to be honest with other people in a way that other people can learn and understand what they themselves are feeling. And then when that person understands it, when they look and they say, there's a million things, but you let me know that this thing that I'm feeling, I'm not crazy. I feel the same thing. And thank you for making a song. Thank you for making a painting. Thank you for whatever. Thank you for making a stand-up routine. Thank you for letting me know I'm not crazy, because I see that thing too. That's where the value comes in. The value comes in being seen. And then maybe somebody could say, oh, it's $35 for a ticket to go see this comedian. But in that act, in that laughter, you feel seen, like somebody got that point of view, that thing that happened that makes you know that you're not crazy. And there's no real value on that. But we live in a system that goes, yeah, here's a price tag for it. I think some people get caught up with like the bullshit on value, like, oh, this person went to this particular university, so therefore, and showed with this particular museum, and therefore this is a value. And that has nothing to do with value. That's about an experience. But value is being seen. Value is being known that you're not crazy, that the thing that you're feeling is real, and here's something to help you process it.
I want to pick up on that in relation to the projects and the work that Kyla's doing, because I think it seems to me that you are trying to encourage artists to think along those lines, to think along the values of being seen, of connection, of some sense of a sort of a dialogue where they actually get some sort of feeling and provocation and sense of self through the process of showing the work, rather than just more than financial remuneration. But obviously we're working within a system that pushes artists into maybe working in a different way to that is profitable, but maybe isn't creatively profitable. And how do we balance that? How do you try and sort of coax artists out of that system?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people are just really excited that there is an opportunity to think otherwise. It doesn't really feel like coaxing. Like people just didn't know that maybe, you know, people on my end want to work in that way. You know, a lot of artists came into Alvaro's presentation, and we're just so thrilled to know that it was at all possible, you know, and I think there's real value in that. Artists realizing that there is someone with agency and they can mimic that agency as it works for them, and understand even just a bit of what their negotiation power is, and the freedom in which they want to move in the space as possible. But you know, yeah. So it's not at all coaxing, but I do think that there is a real. Alvaro had an Instagram rant not that long ago where he was speaking about intellectual laziness, and I think that really resonated with a lot of people. I got a lot of screenshots about that one, but I think there is a lot of laziness, and the business can get really, really big as people allow it. As Tim was saying, it can get to a really, thank you. To a disgusting level, a scary level, but there are other ways to measure success. Success is, you know, the woman who met you on the train, who helped shift your trajectory, seeing your show. That's success too. And I think, you know, for every artist personally, there are these other measures of success that they want, and that's all what we consider when we think about the best context to do a project, you know. It's not just the space that's going to make it the most money, you know. It's not just the white wall and the bright light and the way to kind of manipulate the work to make the most money and feel like an environment that people associate with going into and spending hundreds of $1,000s. I mean, when you think about context, you have to think about all the other successes, all the other measures of success that are important to you, and I mean it's been wonderful. I think artists are really open to it. I think it's more on the dealer side where there's that grasping at the old ugly way of doing things. I don't see it so much on the artist side.
But I do think, and I mean, maybe everyone will disagree, that there is a taboo around collaboration that continues to exist within the art world. I mean, we have seen like an enormous buzz around collaboration across different industries. So the music industry, the fashion industry, you see these sort of enormous sort of mega powers within those industries working together. So whether, you know, these are facile examples, but whether it's like a Gucci and a Balenciaga or a Kanye and a Jay-Z, and like, I don't think we're seeing that same trend for collaborate. And it is a trend within those industries. So I'm not necessarily saying that these are models that we want to replicate, but I can't imagine a scenario where you see multiple artists collaborating together in a sort of regular, consistent way. It's just something that hasn't seemed to move into the art world in terms of, you see it with group shows, but you don't see it with a specific piece of work. And I wonder why that hasn't happened, and why these ideas of authorship, or maybe it goes back to this idea of exclusivity, this idea of control has maybe prevented those things. Do we want to see those things happening in the art world? This is like a loose question that someone can be brave and answer. Tim, you're nodding, so we'll go to you.
Delete Facebook, by the way. I know this is streaming live, and I have to say it.
Fair enough.
That answer seems better put to you, Alvaro, because this is a question related to artists collaborating, it sounded like.
To an extent, but I think it's about collaboration in general across the art
Yeah,
world.
for sure. So during the pandemic, I got involved with a number of groups, both an LA group, a gallery association that I founded, co-founded with a group, which was really inspiring, and it's all about communication and collaboration, you know, cooperation, etc. It's been a little more fractured since the pandemic, which hasn't even ended, is ended. You know, and there's other national and international associations that were founded with the intent to, again, this idea of collaborating and cooperating across the spectrum. I mean, I speak about it a lot. I'm really lucky to be able to collaborate really deeply and strongly with Mendes Wood. You know, it's a really rare relationship. I don't think it should necessarily be exclusive, and I know that us together would love to bring other people into our kind of create a consortium of like-minded, I think, dealers that are interested in discernment and a clear intentionality. This is unfortunately, it's tough. People talk a big game, but when it comes down to economy and economics, as Pedro so eloquently spoke about, collaboration and cooperation become a little more difficult for people somehow, magically, yeah? So, I really, because I've done so many different things, blessedly, in the art world, I really firmly believe that everybody would win in such a bigger way the more that could happen. I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm open to anybody out there on, Facebook Live. And I'm being really serious about it, and I know it might even sound silly, like, with whatever people think of the gallery or this white guy up here. I really believe in it, and I know that Pedro, Matthew, and Felipe and the whole gang are on the same headspace. And I'm sure there are other people out there that want to do it. The artists are going to... But it goes back to that notion about talking about serving the artist. The person who's going to win the most in this is the artist. And when the artist wins, everybody wins, including the audience, whether it's a paying audience or an audience that's just getting an experience and getting an influence and getting impacted. I mean, it's not hard to figure out. And, yeah.
So why isn't it happening? Sorry, go ahead.
People don't... economics, cash, money gets in the way of these conversations. As soon as an artist... their values rise, and not the gift value or the extrinsic. It's like these values. It's people suddenly don't want to cooperate. You got to unmask the truth of it. When an artist is selling, it's sales. We're in Art Basel, Miami. There's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of art being traded. The people are putting out press releases about the figures they're selling. But I don't know. Pedro?
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make a commentary. I think people also don't dive into this unknown abyss of collaboration because they don't know. They're afraid. The moment you realize that collaborating means simply exchanging ideas and values and exponentializing what each component is best at, and making a better performing, actually, living system and again, when Tim says the artist is the one who wins, it is, because art is something that is about altruism. Art is about changing the world. It is not about making somebody famous, the gallerist famous, the artist himself famous, or it is about creating a change. It's a junction. It is a thought provocation. It is a rupture. And ruptures don't obey patterns. They don't obey structures that are imposed. They're self-inventing and they're self-propagating. So when Alvaro disruptively decides to redesign the geopolitics and the geopower of the art world, what he's doing is basically saying, this whole thing is just simply a make-believe. It's a fiction. The reality is that we all here together, and we all here for real ideas and real meaning and for art. So it sort of pulls the curtain of the theater before the play is over, and it sort of shows the actors naked. It's sort of kind of cool in a way. It's very
Alvaro, this is a good moment to speak of our conversation the other night. I was talking about Ram Dass, who's one of the great thinkers and influencers of. I don't think he was an influencer, but he sure influenced a lot of people. But he is, amongst many other things, he was originally known as Richard Alpert, but became Ram Dass. Most of you guys know the story. But he simply would say, we're all just walking each other home. In the end, that's what everybody's doing. And hopefully, sometimes you want to push a few people ahead of the, get them home quicker. But, I didn't say that. But it's as simple as that, you know. It's like a consciousness of life. And unfortunately, the power of economy often disrupts people's consciousness and discernment.
I think it's the power of economy, but I think it's also the power of simplicity and the power of communication, because I think we're living in a moment, back to your point on Facebook, where people have learned to distill their ideas into very specific, very digestible sort of buzzwords. So the idea of something complex or subtle or multifaceted is it's not successful at the moment, because things that are short and punchy and quick resonate. And I think that's also a problem that we're seeing at the moment. And actually this relates to a question that I wanted to ask you, Alvaro, about your role as a black artist, because, over the last few years, we have seen this incredible push to amplify black voices, and a lot of galleries have tried to undo past wrongs by, signing a variety of different artists of color. And I think one thing that I find really fascinating about what you do with having multiple artists also relates to the fact that you have talked about refusing to sort of be pigeonholed into a certain identity. And there's a quote that you said to me in the past where you said there are so many distinctions between how people live their identity. And I guess I'm wondering if these shared relationships are about refusing to be one identity, refusing to be the black artist that is signed by this gallery because they wanted a black artist to say that they were working with. And, there's another quote that I love that you said. You said, I always wanted to be a person who I thought people gave a certain flexibility to in terms of their imagination around me. And I think it's firstly incredibly beautiful. But it's also really important, I think, to encourage younger artists to think that way. And again, this is a really long question because everyone keeps saying so much interesting stuff that I want to say so many things in response. But if you can pull out a question from that jumble, tell me what you think about that.
So I think, there's a couple points that I wanted to bring up. First, in the old thing, there's a lot of narratives that we inherit that really are meant to fuck us over, and like Tim was saying with that quote, we're all meant to we're all just walking each other home. There's a lot of people who imagine, who create narratives to sort of make us go to the wrong house. I was thinking about this whole time, and I've said I've said this story a couple times because it's been playing in my head in terms of just how disruptive narratives are and how fucked we can be. So 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine posted on Instagram in her stories about that it's in the US, it's illegal to separate a dog from its puppies before 8 weeks, because we know that a dog needs to heal and it needs to bond with its puppy. In America, a couple weeks ago, they pulled out the possibility of maternity leave from legislation. And so a woman almost a week after giving birth, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, will have her boss from Starbucks call her, and no disrespect to Starbucks, but they'll call her and say, hey, we know you just had a baby, congratulations, but we're gonna get really busy right now, and we would love if you came in, and we would love if you...
It's Starbucks. Though.
It's Starbucks. They're a little bit upset. But they would...
Facebook and Starbucks.
But they would call, that manager would call that woman and said, hey, I know you're, congrats on the baby, but I need you to come in. is going to be busy. And that woman who just had that newborn baby is going to go to work because she knows she needs the money. She knows she needs that $15 an hour. And then at 6 o'clock, the manager is going to go to her and say, hey, at 7, it's going to get really busy. All these people coming from work. We need you to stay an extra 4 hours. And that woman's going to stay that extra 4 hours because she knows that she needs that. If you look at any newspaper, none of the newspapers will tell you that story. My friend sent me a thing with Kanye West on the front page of the newspaper the same week, talking about Kanye West said Me Too's a hoax, when if Kanye West is responsible for the violence against all these women. And there's a lot of narrative, the money in the art world, all of that is bullshit. You know, half of America's money, taxes go to the military. If you cut American military by 4%, you could pay every college kid. But if you look at the newspaper, they're talking about whatever fucking billionaire is avoiding taxes when we're not even talking about the real issues. And we gotta stop getting caught up with the okie doke and be ready to walk each other home. And we gotta know what that home is. We gotta stop getting caught up with the bullshit, because that shit ain't gonna solve any. If we keep inheriting these narratives that are good talking points, that'll pull out our emotional triggers, and that's what I mean with this art thing. We gotta get back to what is really the value. What are we creating? I have no problems. If I had $1 trillion, I would pay $1 trillion for Ghostface Killer. I would give Ghostface Killer $1 trillion. Them all that I got is you days. Those things saved my life. When Ghost was singing about all the things he was singing in that song, that saved my life. When Pac rapped about what we were going through and keep your head up, that saved my life. If I had $1 million, I would give them $1 million. I don't really care about the money, but what I do care is about the structures that they were rapping about. And we got to look at the real issues. Why do you have, if you watch, and this is why we're doing the show in LA. This is why I'm doing the show in LA. If you ever watch Keep Your Head Up, in the beginning of Keep Your Head Up it's a video. It's dedicated to Letitia Harling. The fight goes on. This is happening this video came out in 93. Now, for those who don't know the story of Letitia, I think she was 13. Every day she would go to the corner store, she would buy she would take an orange juice, and she would take a bag of chips, and she would put the orange juice and the bag of chips in her bag, and then she would go to the counter and she would pay the cashier. And on this particular day, the cashier was in the back, and his wife was on the counter. So she sees Letitia Harling, this 13-year-old black girl, putting this orange juice and this thing in her back, and she thinks, oh, she must be stealing. So she starts screaming at this 13-year-old girl. Somehow they get into a verbal altercation. The woman gets scared. She kills Letitia. The woman goes to trial. The judge looks at this woman and says, I understand your fear, and I get why you killed that little girl. And she got probation. A few weeks later, Rodney King happened, and then LA burned down. We never talked about that. We never talked about what that message would have said to those parents, all those black parents who thought, damn, if I send my kid to the corner store and they decide to kill him, they're going to go to the judge, and the judge going to say, oh, we get it. We get why you killed that kid. And that's what's happening today. But the narrative that we inherited from that conversation was not about the fear that those parents had in their eyes when they heard that verdict. The value that they knew that their kids' lives was being placed on. That's what we really got to get to. We got to stop getting caught up with the okey dokes. Sorry, I love to rant. I get to rant here and my girlfriend doesn't hear it. So
I think it's a really important point that you're making and about, hypocrisy and delusion and the way that we sort of make ourselves feel better with certain very top-level, unsubstantial promises. And I feel like we could really dig into that, but I'm also really conscious of time, and I'm conscious that people might have some questions that they want to ask. So I'm going to open it up. Raise your hand if you have a question. I think we have one there at the front.
Thank you all for doing this. This is really great. I've learned a lot. Tim, thank you for offering to mentor young dealers, because I'm going to take you up on that and contact you after the show. I wish I met you 9 years ago. So my name's Carla. I'm from Houston, Texas. I have a gallery in downtown Texas, and that's my dream. I would love to have galleries all over the world. Sorry, this keeps slipping around. And I think right now in the 9 years working with artists, I got a lot of questions, but I'll try to stay on the theme. Artists and gallerists. So if my dream is to have galleries all over the world, how you can't be everywhere at every time. So someone has to manage if I want a Tokyo gallery, if I want a Los Angeles gallery, but I'm out of Houston. Did you try to replicate yourself so that I feel like my artists are my family? So if I have galleries all over, I would like that also to be like a family, that the artist gallery family in Tokyo, in Los Angeles, wherever. How is that kind of possible, if that's a way you can answer?
Well, I would focus on building whatever you're building in Houston into a solid foundation before you think of replicating, frankly. Make sure there's a concrete foundation that's not built out of popsicle sticks and chewing gum or something. Because if you have the solid foundation, then you can build, annexes off of that. It's step by step. My first advice would be, let's slow the fuck down for a minute. And I need to understand, a little bit more of the context. It requires an enormous amount of passion and miles. And that's a bigger discussion. We should do it another after this. Yeah, happy to.
Any other questions? Yes, just here.
So this is part statement, I think. If we go back to this question of economies and how to make it work, and we assume that, as is correct, the artist is the center and the artist makes the decision, and that economies are always, at the end of the day, a question of downside, if the artist says, I want to work with you, and I want to work with you, and I want 20% to go to social activism, and if that doesn't happen, I'm not doing it, where's the problem?
Well, I don't know. Where's the problem?
I don't know, because we're talking about economies. So we go, there's always a problem because it always comes back to the money. But we've stated it comes down to the artist, and if the artist says, I want to work with you, and I want to work with you, why can't that happen? It is happening, but we're saying, well, it doesn't happen everywhere, we're trying to break it down. But it could happen everywhere, because the artist can always say, I want to do this way.
Well, a lot of them do. The case in point, Alvaro here is doing it in, as I said, quite extensively. And other artists do this. It just should happen more, and they should feel more confidence about being able to make a determination for the way they want their, life and career to go.
I think you've got to the very root of human nature, which is just why don't good things happen? Because, you're talking about choices, but why do all these harmful, problematic systems exist? It's easy to say, why doesn't everyone working in an exploitative system refuse? It's so enmeshed, these ways of these impossible forces that seem so much bigger than individuals. I think I get your question. It's a good question. It's kind of an idealistic one as well, because like you can do it. Alvaro is doing it, but it requires a great degree of conviction and sort of personality and something kind of this intangible special quality that I'm sure you've all recognized in Alvaro, which is what makes him such a special artist.
I think just real quick, I don't think we shouldn't get lost in the weeds of thinking that. And Alvaro is, as we've been saying, is a very highly unusual person, creature, artist in the world, in any world, just as a person, unrelated to the art world. That's a fact. But he's not the only artist that's working with lots and lots of galleries or dealers or nonprofits or what have you. He just happens to be a person of this moment that's doing it in a more a profound and dynamic way, and it's
maybe a creative way.
Yeah, it's a little bit more creative. It's maybe another 2.0 or 3.0 version of how it could work. I think that's important to state.
I also know a lot of teachers who stay after school and work with kids to do their art, and I think it's. I mean, this is what I mean about narratives. Right? Like, there's really an attack on teachers. People call them lazy because they get summers off. I mean, those are the ultimate collaborators. They collaborate with 30 kids every day. That's a huge collaboration happening. There's a lot of collaboration happening around us all the time. We just happen to be in a space where there's a hyper-focalization on it. But that, if I look around me, there's collaborations happening all the time. Musically, like I grew up in New York. There was musicians from every neighborhood, Flatbush, Bed-Stuy, some of them we know, Biggie, Lil' Kim, Junior Mafia. We in Florida, there's so many musicians who are collaborating and have for centuries and have birthed each other and given each other space. So I think collaboration is always happening. I think in this specific thing that is hyper visible, there's a certain mode of operation that plays out. But if I went to if I go to my aunt's house and I know I can't, one aunt I could go in the fridge and take out whatever I want. Another aunt I go to her house, I can't go to the fridge, so I'm not going to go to the fridge and be upset. I think it's there's always, if I go to the, I think it's where we look for things and the narratives that we kind of tell. But I see collaboration all the time. I see collaboration with all my friends who are teachers.
Any final questions? Should we take a last... there's so many. Okay, we'll go to you because you're at the...
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for this panel. The question I had is around the relationships between artists and gallerists and how technology has either enabled that relationship or has threatened the relationship where artists can go directly to their audience themselves. Do you guys see technology and use technology to kind of build the relationship, or is it a threat to the relationship in the long term?
I mean, look, during this whole period of lockdown, I was able to talk to Alvaro and hear his experiences, and we would call each other and sort of give each other's hope. We were both going through really critical situations. He was in New York City. I was in São Paulo, probably one of the most heavily hit places. In a way, obviously, your question is much beyond that. What you're asking is very legit. I think social media has given artists maybe some sort of visibility if they were able to display their work, or maybe hit some sort of, cultural, virtual community that was invisible otherwise. I don't think one excludes the other necessarily. I think galleries are systems that have a physical and also a some sort of virtual component. They've always had. I think in the 80s they sent faxes and sort of photos to clients and to artists sent photos of their studios by post. Yeah, I hope I have hinted a little bit on your question.
Kyla, what do you make of that? Because obviously you're sort of thinking about new models for things, and is technology a model that you're thinking about?
Well, I mean, I don't consider it a threat at all. I mean, I don't consider it a threat when anybody has agency. You know, ultimately, I think it's great for artists to be able to put out there what they want to put out there. You know, Alvaro was talking about narratives. I don't really think it's fair for any gallery or really any entity to control the narrative of an artist. But I also don't think that every artist needs a gallery. So if artists are online and they're selling their work and they're fulfilling their goals, I don't consider that a threat to a gallery. They just don't need to be part of the model. I don't know if that's answering your question, but no, I mean, I think there's space for it all.
Also, I mean, there's a difference between being an artist and being a very good painter. You could be a really great painter, but not be an artist.
I thought Kayla just built everyone up and then you just knocked them right back down. I think that's probably a good note to end on. I'm conscious that Alvaro actually has to get a flight, and I feel like I could ask these guys questions for days. So thank you so much, everyone.